Pastor Mark here. Special series of conversations with my wife, Grace. We've been married faithfully 31 years. And I'm in a series right now, Leave and Cleave, on family systems and how to architect your immediate and extended family to bless your marriage and children for generations. It's basically what to do and what not to do. In addition to the sermons you can find at realfaith.com/cleave, I've got a special 4-part series with my wife, Grace, where we talk about this very practically and share from our own marriage and experience. And so I really hope you enjoy it. And again, you can find all the content, including the workbook, along with the sermons, realfaith.com/cleave, CLEAVE.
Ready to go?
Sure.
Okay. Mark and Grace Driscoll here. Welcome back to the Real Marriage Podcast. We're doing a short series on Leave and Cleave. And if you go to realfaith.com, there's also full sermons and a full workbook. It's a 21-day journey to help couples figure out how to have a healthy family system and have that conversation with themselves and their extended family. And so the concept of leave and cleave comes from Genesis 2:24 in the King James Version. And we're gonna talk about enmeshment today. So I'm gonna sketch it out. I'm a verbal processor and visual. And then I want to talk to you about enmeshment. So here's kind of how I see it. There's a tension within each person to be an individual and to be part of a group. We don't want to be completely alone, but we don't want to be controlled by other people. And so on one side, we'll call it cutoff. And this comes from Bowen's Family Systems. This is some of their language. Enmeshment would be on the other side. There's always tension here. And so throughout life, in different seasons, like when you're, a baby, you're here. Ideally, when you're a teenager, you're here. And when you become an adult, you're moving toward here, independence and differentiation. And then really the healthy.
So enmeshment is fully dependent. Your communication, your needs are being met fully by each other or the person caring for you. Everything is connected. There's nothing yet that's not connected in your life when you're enmeshed.
Okay, so enmeshment is you really don't have an identity as an individual.
Yeah.
And you're so concerned about your family that you have a hard time becoming an adult, making your own plans, living your own life. Because what happens in here, there are things, so nodal events will happen. Talk about this. And
The fight, flight, freeze concepts.
and then the caregiver.
Mm-hmm.
So nodal events are big events that kind of shake the entire family. Think of it like an earthquake, and there's tremors and everybody feels it, and it can last for generations. So that can be somebody marries into the family, or somebody dies or divorces out of the family, an addition or subtraction to the extended family. This can be somebody gets cancer, it could be an issue like moving across state, or immigration to a new country, or living through a war or bankruptcy, big events. And the different people in the family respond differently. Some fight and they escalate and they get emotional and they carry a lot of anxiety. And since a family is an emotional system, the anxiety gets transferred. And then flight, some people just disappear. They'll either emotionally disappear, they'll physically leave. Teenagers will run away from home.
Or they shut down.
They shut down, or they just move halfway across the country to get away from it. Freeze, some people are so overwhelmed by the nodal event and all the emotions and all the processing in the family, they just don't know what to say or do. They just kind of freeze.
It's common in COVID.
Yeah, in COVID, this was for sure. And then caregive, there's usually in the family somebody who's like, people are hurting, I'm going to take care of everybody. and they become the burden carrier and they take responsibility. They're like, my brother's not doing good. I'm going to save him. And they can get a savior complex.
They need to be needed. So,
well, these people always they gravitate rather toward enmeshment. And so let's talk about, we'll talk about these in the next. So today we'll talk about enmeshment. Next episode, we'll talk about cutoff. And then last episode, we'll talk about differentiation. So enmeshment, what is that? Who is that? What does that look like?
It's common for women. Women tend to be really enmeshed with their parents more so than boys, but
More emotionally connected.
in these days and times that we're facing, we see a lot of overmother boys as well. So enmeshment would be, we talked about this just in our relationship where I would call when we would get in a fight, I would call my mom when we were newly married instead of praying, going to the Lord, or having wise counsel outside of the extended family that we both agreed on and trusted, or just praying and going to you and saying, okay, how do we figure this out? I instead would go to my mom saying, I need you to pray. We're fighting about this, arguing about how do, I would try and get advice, but it's not fair for my mom, for you, or for me to put that on her. That's not her responsibility anymore once I'm married.
And there's a difference between privacy and secrecy.
That's right.
Secrecy is something really bad is happening and we're trying to hide it so we don't get caught. Privacy is just not your business. So let's say you're a 13-year-old girl, and you've got a crush on a boy, and every day after school you talk to your mom about that. Once you're a 33-year-old married woman, you can't be sharing all the intimate details of your life. Yeah, just as an example, all of a sudden it's like what was okay at one life stage is unhealthy at the next. And so, I think one of the reasons why it's harder for moms to allow differentiation is, just talk about what it's like to act when a life starts. There is no differentiation between the mother and the baby. It's complete enmeshment is where it starts.
Yeah. And I was a stay-at-home mom. And so for me, it was even more so, which I believe God intended it that way because that's the bonding and connection that's supposed to happen with your child. But as they get older and as you train them up to mature and grow and be outside of the family unit and not be enmeshed, there's a process that's supposed to happen. I was more the caregiver, and so I would serve incessantly. Like I just served my kids. I did everything for them, thinking that out of that they would learn to serve, but instead they thought, oh, this is great. I'm just going to keep free.
It's so nice to have free staff. Yeah.
And that's not healthy for boys either. Like I can train my daughters up in how to be, busy at home and live with discernment and wisdom in the world. But for boys, you got to come in and as a dad and help them not be enmeshed with me anymore at a certain point. And you did that, and we had to figure that out. But for moms, there is in each stage, there's a release. There's a process of almost, it's not bad grieving, it's healthy grief. It's like, okay, they're moving into their next season of maturity. I need to release a little more and release a little more as they're ready and as they're maturing and growing. But there's a grief for a mom because it means I'm not as needed. And it's a good thing, but and emotionally it can be hard. It pulls at the heartstrings. And so if we don't do that in each season, we just keep holding on as moms until they leave the home. And then we still try and stay in their life and help them make all those decisions and try and speak too much.
Or don't even allow them to leave. So this is the enmeshment means you can't leave mother and father. You're still financially dependent. You're emotionally dependent. Maybe even physically dependent. This is where you have an entire generation of young men that have been overmothered, underfathered. They are enmeshed. They're not leaving home and they're not launching. They're not in the workforce statistically. We've got the lowest percentage of able-bodied young men in the history of the country that have just exited the workforce. They are literally just living with their mother, and they are completely overmothered.
Parenting on Point is this month's premium resource for a gift of any amount to Real Faith. I'll get you Parenting on Point. It's from my wife, Grace, and I. We have 5 children that are grown. We have 4 grandchildren. I'm happy to report that we didn't lose anyone along the way, and all our kids know, love, and serve Jesus. Oftentimes, people will tell you, hey, I've got a great parenting resource. Well, parenting is like communism. It works well on paper, and once you get people involved, it's very complicated. We've waited decades to share with you some very practical, very helpful, very biblical parenting advice, and I'd love to get it into your hands for a gift of any amount.
And part of what you've got with the enmeshment is the men are not leaving their mother and father, and oftentimes they don't even have a father. And so if you're in a single parent home where, let's say, there's only a mother, the odds are the children are going to be over mother, and the children are going to be enmeshed.
Well, and studies show that boys learn to be men by watching their fathers.
Yeah.
And if there's not a father in the home, they're only watching their mothers, which mothers are great, but they're not good fathers.
Yeah, well, a good mom is a bad dad. The good dad is a bad mom. That's where, if you are a young man and you want to leave your mother and father and differentiate and be an adult and get ready to get married and have your own family, if you don't have a father in your life, then that's where church comes in, and you've got to find the equivalent of a spiritual father. Paul says of Titus, Timothy, Onesimus, you're my sons. And so the Bible says that when we're in church, older men should be like fathers. And so this is where church is really critical and important, because the church is another kind of family. It's an extended spiritual family.
Yeah, and for single moms too, that's the only option they have.
Yeah, and a lot of times too, if you grow up in a single parent home, if you say you're a young man, is like you're concerned about your mom, and you're like, if I leave, she's all alone, and who's going to look after her, and who's going to take care of her? And so these can be some sad circumstances, that produce some limitations. But if you do marry, but you don't leave your mother and father, and you're still enmeshed, and you don't have that bright line between now we're a family, but leaving mother and father to cleave or pursue one another, then what happens is the marriage suffers for the extended family. So maybe talk about that, because usually a mom wants to pull toward enmeshment, and usually it's a dad who pushes toward differentiation or cutoff. That's why when our boys hit a certain age, I said, you've been a wonderful mom. You've done a great job. I'm now going into the driver's seat. You're in the passenger seat. It takes a man to raise a man. And now that they're taller than you and stronger than you, they don't want to listen to you. They still need to honor their mother. But at the end of the day, dad's got to pick up from here, because I understand guys. But what happens to a married couple if either the husband or the wife is enmeshed with their extended family and they've not left their mother and father?
They can't really become one flesh, because they're still trying to navigate and being pulled in the direction of the extended family. And so it makes it really hard to focus just on you as a new husband or a new wife and make a life that is what God is calling you to, because you're hearing all these voices of what you're supposed to be doing from extended family, which may or may not be good, but it's not always the Holy Spirit. And so when I'm focused on you and your needs and our needs together to build a healthy family, then we can cleave and become one flesh. But if I've got all this, I'm trying to, but I need to do this for my mom or my sister or my brother or my aunt or my uncle.
Especially if you're the caregiver.
Yes, then I'm not able to keep my law of priority with my husband as easily. And so I have too many distractions from what God has called me to do in marriage.
So we've got 3 married kids. So what would their priorities have been before they married versus after they married?
For our daughters, I think it's a little different between sons and daughters. But for our sons, they need to figure out how to, get a job, make money, provide, how to, mature in certain areas so that they'd be ready to have a wife and future kids. So they needed to have you help them figure that out. And they needed to still honor me. And the cool thing about our boys is that they would come to me about relationship stuff. So when they were interested in a gal, they would come to me and, okay, how do I understand this about her? And how do I talk to her about this? How do I consider her in this? So I was included in that part, which isn't an enmeshment. It's just wise counsel.
No, what that is, you go from a caregiver to a coach.
Yep.
A caregiver is, I'm going to take care of you. And a coach is, I'm going to teach you how to make your own decisions, carry your own responsibilities.
But now that they're married, they do that with their wife. Now, if they want our counsel as a couple and want to ask us questions, we're happy to share whatever, and they can choose to or not take the counsel. But it's different now. My sons don't have to come to me and ask me all those questions. Where with our daughters, I wanted to teach them how to honor their future husband and be respectful, and what that would look like and care for their husband someday, and run a home and, figure out what their identity was with a future spouse. And so now that our one daughter is married, her husband helps her do that. And she's able to honor him and work through that. She doesn't have to come to me and, ask the same questions that she used to ask me, because he's taking care of her and she trusts him and he trusts her. They're figuring it out.
Well, and so, like, before we marry, one of the great errors I think that Christian families make, they say, here's my priorities, God and family. No. God, yes, and then spouse, because we were a family before we had kids, and we still need to be a family after our kids launch and start their own families. And sometimes the reason that there is enmeshment is the marriage of mom and dad is not solid.
Right.
And so the kids are feeling the pressure of, gluing the marriage together or managing the dysfunction of mom and dad. That leads to a lot of enmeshment. But for us now, like, priorities God, and then our marriage, and then it wasn't just the kids, but it was each of the 5 kids, and having an individual relationship with them, because they're different personalities and different maturities and different life stages, and then work, which is for us ministry. But now, the kids are marrying, they're starting their own family. So it can't just be family. It's like, well, our family and then their families. We want to love and support and serve their families. And then as they add kids, it just gets a lot more beautiful and more complicated. And there's more people to consider in the system. But within that, I think it is hard, because if you don't agree on this and talk about this, the constant tension is some people in the family are like, I want out because it's too much, it's too intense.
Yeah.
And others are like, and a lot of the pressure sometimes is to get sucked back in. And you've got a real problem when, let's say it's a husband and a wife, and every time the family has something, maybe it's too much, maybe it's too many meetings and family dinners and crises and emergencies and texts at, midnight. And it's like, we don't have a good boundary here. All of their drama ends up in our house and our life. It doesn't mean that you don't care, but you don't carry it. And then, you've got a problem when one spouse is like, enough already, I'm done, this is too much. And then the other spouse still gets sucked in. And so this is when all of a sudden, let's say, for example, families getting together for meals multiple times a week and doing all the holidays and vacations together, and it's extended family is the only concept of family. If you're going and your spouse isn't, you've got major division.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I can't. So I was talking to somebody, and they kept going to everything that their extended family ever did. And the spouse asked, why do you keep doing that? And they said, well, I can't abandon my family. It's like, no, we're a family. That's your extended family. But when that happens, you've got division. And Jesus says a divided house falls down. It doesn't work. And so, this doesn't work, but it really doesn't work when you start adding kids.
Well, and I think a change of perspective in that is that if we want to be a healthy family, but they're not a healthy extended family and they want to keep pulling us that way, the best thing we can actually do to love them is to be a healthy family and model what that looks like, so that then they realize, oh, I guess we aren't healthy in some areas. If we keep enabling by going back and playing that role that they want us to play in the previous years of our life or whatever, now as a new married adult, we're not helping them. There's no way to highlight their issues, and the Lord could work through that with them, and maybe they could become healthy too and see that they don't have good boundaries or whatever the issues might be. But when we're willing to work on a healthy relationship, then it's an opportunity for them to do that as well.
Well, no, I close with this too. It also is discipling your own children.
Yep.
If your extended family has a bad system and it's dysfunctional and it's not healthy and it's, let's say it's enmeshed and it's everybody's into everybody's business too much, and every holiday is a head-on collision and a lot of tension, and vacations come with a lot of expectation, and it's not like there's a bunch of families that are extended families. It's one big enmeshed family. Boy, then your kids are growing up in that environment and they are thinking that that's how they should do marriage and family. That's where a dysfunctional family system becomes a generational curse. And so I'll close with this, comes to mind. So we did this, thanks for processing with me, but we'll deal with cutoff in the next episode. But this is what we talked about with our kids that are married before they got married. So here's Grace and I, and we had 5 kids. Now 3 of them are married. So here's now one of our other kids is married, and one of our kids is married, and one of our kids is married. And here's what we have now. Now what we've got, we don't have a family, we have 4 families. And that would be our extended family. And that extended family is made up of 4 immediate families. So let's say we want to do Christmas or Thanksgiving or a trip or a vacation, or I don't know, we're all getting together for, mom and dad's anniversary or a baby's born or a wedding comes or whatever.
Family dinner.
Then whatever this is that overlaps, the families need to talk about it. And they need to come to an agreement of, here's what we're going to do. And one family may say, for Christmas, we're going to take a trip. We're not going to be there. They are a family. They have the right to make that decision. It's Thanksgiving and we got time off work and we're just going to hang out with our immediate family. We're not going to get with extended family. And so there shouldn't be any judgment. There shouldn't be any attack. Different families get to come to their own decisions. When it's enmeshed, there's one decision for everybody. And if you don't agree with it, the rest of the family pressures you or they cut you off. And we'll deal with that in the next episode.